Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series. As always, my name is Scott Daly, and I am a constant reader. And
boy.
And that's Matt Freeman. This week on the show, we inch closer and closer to the tower as we cover chapters 5, 6, and 7 and finish up part 1 of this final novel. Jake gets caught in a mind trap, but is saved by his best friend Oi, and Roland and Eddie officially recruit John Cullum as a board member of the Tet Corporation. Then, our quartet is whole once again. But for how long? Matt, what did you think of this week's reading?
Well, for those of you still listening after that intro, I loved it. Of course, as has been told to me many times, that this is an unusual book in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. I love the mind trap stuff. We're gonna have a lot of fun talking about, I think, just the writing, I mean, a lot of stuff. But I think my favorite thing about that section was the writing and how it makes you feel, how it really sucks you in. Mm-hmm. And then the John Cullum stuff is just sort of classic King making you fall in love with a character pretty quickly, if you weren't already in love with him, which you should have been, honestly.
Sure. Yeah, I think, I've said this many times, and I think it's never been more true than in this week's episode. There are a lot of things I remember from this book very clearly. There are a lot of moments in this book that I will remember for the rest of my life. This week's readings were not typically one of those moments. This is one of those passages that in the rush to get through this book as fast as possible the first time I read it, these are these moments that kind of fell to the wayside. But I am so appreciative of the show and this project because it forces me to spend time on these moments that still might not be things that I really stick in my memory when I think about the Dark Tower, but are very important moments and very beautiful moments and beautifully written moments by Stephen King. So I once again am so appreciative of this project that I get to sit here with the Jake mind trap scene, which is something I never really thought about beyond the first time I experienced it. And I'm just very excited for this conversation, as always.
Yeah, right. It's cool. It's the kind of thing I like to pay attention to because it's the kind of thing where part of you says, King could have just blown past this. Like, it could have just been Jake ran down the hallway, encountered no resistance, and got to Susanna, right?
Yeah.
Like plot wise, it could have been. But I think that setting aside the necessity of plot, I think that it's doing a lot of interesting stuff with respect to like just where Jake's head is at and what's happening with his character and kind of reminding us of his backstory in some really important ways. I think you've pointed out, and will continue to do so this week, that a lot of what the first part of this book is doing is kind of reminding us who these people are, where they come from, who the relevant characters of their backstories are.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's happening there.
Absolutely. There's so much to talk about the why of the mind trap and beyond just the how of it and the technical skill on display. The why of that scene is something I really want to spend some time on because I think there's some interesting things happening there that I never really thought about in my journey to the tower in the past. So
yeah,
can't wait. Let's waste no time and jump right into it. Before we do that, though, I have to do a quick oopsie, Matt. So I messed up. So
Okay.
Last week I said that the Bad Company song Bad Company I said a shotgun was the original lyric and King changed it to a 6-shooter. I was wrong. When I went and looked up the lyrics, somehow the first thing that came up was the Five Finger Death Punch cover of this song, in which they changed the lyric to a shotgun. And so people pointed out that it was actually 6-gun and in the original version. I don't know why when I searched it, why the original version didn't come up. I guess maybe the Five Finger Death Punch is just like a more well-known cover than the original in this case. I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe more recent. Who knows? Maybe you have been searching so much Five Finger Death Punch stuff this week that Google just assumed that's what you meant. I
mean, you know me. Like a day can't go by without me entering the words Five Finger Death Punch into a Google search engine. So.
we all know you, Scott. We all know you. Yeah, that's funny. I mean, I like how people chose to point it out to us as like this being a difference in levels of the tower, where on our level of the tower, it's shotgun.
I think I just got so like excited about the idea that King changed something again for no reason other than it fits into his stuff that I like stopped my research train a little bit earlier than I should have. It happens, but thank you everyone for pointing that out. So corrected. I stand corrected. There we go.
Yep, we're all good. That's why we're doing this as a podcast instead of,
instead of just Matt and I talking. That would suck.
Yeah.
Who wants to not listen to that? Can we start the chapters, please?
Let's do it.
All right, let's get into chapter 5, which is titled In the Jungle, the Mighty Jungle. So we begin this week back with Jake in the Dixie Pig, once again returning to the scene of Callahan's death, a scene that we've come back to. I think this is the third time now in the course of these 5 chapters. We see here that Jake, who was indeed prepared to die when he walked into the restaurant, would have stayed with Callahan if not for Oy. So Eddie read that situation exactly right. And the only reason Jake indeed leaves, as we see from inside his head, is because of Oy. So that's good. Good for you, Eddie.
Yeah. It basically, like you said, interestingly, revisiting this same critical moment multiple times, and again emphasizing how important it was that Eddie was able to do that. So the book is really reminding us, hey, this was important.
Mm-hmm. And then we get this just wonderful moment as Jake sprints into the kitchen of the Dixie Pig. It says, steam billowed against his face, hot and wet. The jungle, perhaps setting the stage for what followed. The mighty jungle, perhaps not. And so this is a thing, like this chapter in particular is absolutely stuffed with something we've talked about several times in the past, with King's very like classic parenthetical thought interruption style, where he splits a paragraph in half with this parenthetical internal thought of the character. And it's everywhere in these chapters, especially as we move into Jake's whole Bama flashback. That's absolutely stuffed with it. And I love that King is setting up not only that technique from the beginning, but like everything that's going to happen in this chapter, right? He says perhaps setting the stage for what followed, and I love that like you can read that on 2 levels, right? You can read that on setting the stage for the jungle scene that's about to happen, and also he's just preparing you for his parenthetical interruptions that are going to happen. It's really great.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And here, of course, this is the classic King, foreshadowing what's going to happen.
Yeah.
In the style very much of a guy telling you a story one-on-one. He's kind of saying, all right, pay attention. We're getting to the good part. This is setting the stage for what's about to happen.
Yeah.
Which he does, I think, more than a couple of times in this week's reading.
Yeah. And if you're someone reading this book in the 2000s, I mean, you've seen the Weem Away comment from last week, which you maybe would have gotten to this song, maybe not. And then you get the title of this chapter, The Jungle, the Mighty Jungle. And then you get these 2 parentheticals and you're like, okay, what the fuck is going on? Like how is that setting the stage for what followed? And so you're titillated a little bit, right? You're like, okay, I'm in.
And it's only in the most kind of bizarre and elliptical way that this has anything to do with the jungle. Like, yes, it is a jungle, but that's only a small part of what is going to happen. But we'll get there.
Yeah. So inside the kitchen, Jake takes the head off of a few Tahine chefs, and then he chats with the lowly dishwasher boy, Jokobim. Did I say that right? I'm going to get called out on if I don't, so I just want to make sure.
It seems like a made-up name to me, so...
Okay.
So,
but you got the audiobook, so...
Jokobim is, I think, how it was said. I think I might have even just...
Jokobim?
I mean,
Son
I thought...
of Hassa.
Yeah, I don't remember.
So this character is from Ludwig, which is a town a bit north of the city of Lud. And I love that, like, the thing I love about this, the detail here, that King has Jake like slip into the speech of Lud while talking with this kid. Like he almost immediately starts saying the word Cully to him. He calls him a pube at some point because he like places his location, and then just he starts reflecting the way those people talk.
Yeah.
It's something that these books have always done, right? Like with the big moment when they got to the Kala is they almost immediately started kind of echoing them in Kala speech. And so it's something that these characters have always just kind of instinctively done, is just adopt the language of wherever they're at or whoever they're talking to. And he just does it here as well. Just like he slips into it immediately.
Yeah. We've pointed this out many times. I still don't know like what is the reason behind it. Like why did King decide okay, my Katet members are going to have this thing where wherever they go, they're going to very rapidly switch into the patois of whatever the location is. Like, and we're not even sure, like, is it magic? Like, is it actually magical? Is it just that they are, clever people, clever and adaptable people, and so they're the kind of people who pick things up quickly? It's not really been explained to us. I don't necessarily expect that it will be explained to us, but I am curious, like, what is the thought process?
Yeah, I mean, my internal understanding for this was always kind of like, well, like King loves to genre hop in this series, right? And so he's crafted characters that like very easily just migrate between the genres. They're very adaptable people, and that is a reflection of their adaptability, that they're designed to be these characters that can just find themselves at home in any situation, and part of that is just adopting the language of that place immediately.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool. Okay,
cool. So he's talking to this person, and despite Jake's pleas to this guy doesn't seem too interested in saving himself, right? He's kind of like completely beaten down by all the servants of the Crimson King. He doesn't really, like, he tells him, like, I love the conversation about, like, there's a whole giant city out there, they'll never find you, and kid, they have video games. He doesn't even know. He's in 1999 right now. He didn't even know what kind of cool ass video games they got there.
Yeah, that's a funny point. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a fascinating little interaction here. In many ways, the whole sequence here is really fascinating because, like, in the kitchen, it leaves you with the impression that, like, maybe there are many places kind of like the Dixie Pig where, you're in some restaurant, you go through an innocuous side door, and suddenly you're in a kitchen full of horrifying monsters and slave children from another universe.
Yeah.
And the book doesn't quite say that's the case, but, like, the fact that this is what's actually in the back area of the Dixie Pig is sort of just gives you this wild picture of what, the Crimson King may have little, beachheads like this kind of all over the place for all we know.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of get the idea through Flaherty. Why can't I say his name? A little bit later that this is like there's places all over the place. Like he's
mm-hmm.
gone back and forth between New York and Fedek before, but he's never gone to this portal. He just goes to the other. Yeah, that there are like these places in the underworld of our world that lead to portals that lead to this monstrous underworld. And it's a cool idea that, like, this is just everywhere around us and we just don't see it.
Yeah, we basically know that Fedek is like this hub of doorways.
Yeah,
and so that kind of gives you this idea that there could be all kinds of Taheen in the world, and whenever they go between locations, they just go through Fedek potentially.
Yeah,
so
definitely. Speaking of which, we head on down past the kitchen. There's like this little hidden door in the pantry, and down a staircase into what looks like, or what is described as, like a hotel lobby stuffed with all these different kiosks. And there are messages in the windows of these kiosks, and they read things like "Last chance for New York souvenirs" and "Visit September 11th, 2001. Ticks still available for this wonderful event. Asthmatics prohibited without doctor's certificate." So this, I think, maybe sheds some more light on why there was perhaps a door to Dallas in 1963 that we talked about last week. It seems like the good people of Fedek were using these doors to just, like, get front row seats to all these tragic and or disastrous moments in our history. That's cool.
Yeah, and it, like you said, these are old doors. These are doors from the old days, from the days when people were still building doors,
mm-hmm.
right? So these are these doors were built by the old people, not by, like, the Crimson King, unless he's been around, for, I don't know, maybe involved somehow. But I just get the impression this is what the old people did for fun. They just went and gawked at horrible tragedies. Yeah,
our understanding was that Fedek was fully populated by an entire civilization, and then they were all wiped out by the Red Death. And then it's only recently that the Crimson King and his band of merry men have returned to populate Fedek again and use it again. So that's we're not sure about all that, but that's basically kind of what Mia hinted at in her whole story of Fedek back in the last book. So
yeah, it's interesting from my perspective. I can't tell you why I feel like the Crimson King hasn't been around for all that long. I guess he's been around for at least as long as Roland has been around. But not, I don't feel like he's been around for like thousands and thousands of years. But.
I think part of that is just because he hasn't been around literally at all in the story so far. Like this is a character we've heard by name since the very beginning, and yet we haven't seen him. We've just seen his workings. As you've pointed out in the past, that's very Sauron-esque, right? That he's just like his emissaries are out there doing his work, but we don't actually get to see the big bad. Maybe ever. I don't know.
Yeah, me neither.
I mean, I do know. I do know.
Yeah.
So as Jake heads further down, he finally gets in touch with Susanna, but only briefly, because he also feels something else attempt to invade his mind. He thought it was probably the low man who had spoken to him through the door. The low man's hand had found dials in some kind of Jake Chambers Dogan and was fiddling with them, trying to freeze me in place, to freeze my feet right to the floor, to stop him. So Jake slams his mind shut to the interference and then carries on. And this is like the things haven't even really started getting weird yet at this point, but this is just a thing that kind of explains why he wasn't communicating with Susanna in last week's chapter. Yeah,
that's a good point. I don't know if I even noticed that that's what that was, but totally. Because she was trying to reach out to him and couldn't. Yeah. So it's getting really weird. And before we get into the weirdness, I wanted to remark on like how the writing of this section sucks you in so deep. Like you feel like you're being pulled into the world of Jake's mind. And I think that's probably intentional because in a sense, the book is doing to you what the mind trap is doing to Jake. The book is sort of hypnotizing you.
Totally agree. I think that is absolutely what King is going for here. And it works so well. It's such a well-written, fun moment. And I'm going to enjoy spending a lot of time on this.
Yeah.
So Jake starts singing, Matt. He starts kind of singing under his breath as he runs down this hallway. He's singing The Tokens, The Lion Sleeps Tonight, which is that song that you gave honestly, Matt, a beautiful rendition of at the start of the show.
Some of my best singing.
Yeah. And then he starts crying too. He's kind of overwhelmed with emotion. And we get this wonderful part here. "'S all right," Jake says, buttoning his fly, then wiping his cheeks with the heel of his hand. Only it wasn't all right. He was more than sad, more than angry, more than scared about the low man running relentlessly up his back trail. Now that the adrenaline in his system had receded, he realized he was hungry as well as sad. Tired too. Tired? Verging on exhaustion. He couldn't remember when he'd last slept. Being sucked through the door into New York, he could remember that, and Oy almost being hit by a taxi, and the God Bomb minister with the name that reminded him of Jimmy Cagney playing George M. Cohan on that old black and white movie he'd watched in the TV in his room when he was small. Because, he realized now, there had been a song in that movie about a guy named Harrigan. Harri, Harrigan. That's me. He could remember those things, but not when he'd last eaten a square. And then Oy interrupts him because this is the beginning of his kind of like diving into his mind, right?
Yeah, you're entering into these run-on sentences that don't really connect to each other, or like they connect in a very stream of consciousness way, and then they take forever to kind of get back to the point of like, wait, what were we talking about?
Yeah, and it's actually like I think it almost requires you to read it, or in your case, listen to it more than once, because he does kind of lose the plot a little bit of what he's saying. Like the point is the thought he's trying to get across here is that it's kind of ridiculous that he remembers all these specific beats, but like can't remember when the last time he slept was, and when the last time he ate was, how exhausted and tired he is. And I think it's important to note that in the time, it feels like much longer for us, but in the time frame of this book, his friend died like yesterday. Like it's been like a day for Jake since the end of Wolves of the Calla. Even that, like maybe like 16 hours or something ridiculous. Like, so like it's been a crazy short amount of time for him, and it's just wearing on him. And then he's got this thing messing with his brain at the same time to make that even worse.
Yeah, exactly.
But there was another song, Matt. A song that he's singing that played during a different movie, a scary movie with monsters, but he can't remember what it is, but he can't help but keep thinking about it as he runs forward. And as he runs this tiled hallway, he starts to transform into, well, a jungle, a mighty jungle. Uh-huh. And just as Jake remembers the name of the song, but not the movie. He finds a dinosaur standing there in the middle of the jungle / hallway is a fucking dinosaur. And this is the mind trap, Matt. This is the thing that our good pal, the dishwasher boy, tried to warn Jake about before he got to it. And this mind trap takes Jake down this rabbit hole of memory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The dinosaur, the jungle stuff, I think is really effectively terrifying to me.
Yeah.
I found this to be effective horror because, I mean, I guess because a lot of reasons, but like you don't really understand what's going on. You do understand that Jake's being mind fucked somehow by something, but you don't really know what the nature of the thing is. You don't know the nature of the dangers. You don't know the rules. It makes you very uncomfortable. It makes you very worried for Jake and Oi for that matter. And just overall, like, this is one of the more like uncomfortable and sort of, riveted to the book that I've been throughout this series, actually.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, like, I love that King cuts to Oi to kind of demonstrate how this is all happening in his head. I think it's a very clever way of like making it clear what's happening here, while also still just laying on enough confusion when you're like, okay, but why a dinosaur?
Yeah.
And we eventually get the explanation for this, but I love how it kind of sneaks up on you. It sneaks up on Jake. Like, he's running and like the tile slowly gets grass growing through it, and it just keeps to get worse and worse as he keeps running. It's really good.
I like the way that's written in such a way where it doesn't really seem like Jake is noticing that that's unusual.
Yeah.
It's
because like any other normal human being would be like, okay,
yeah. Right.
And he's concerned about it, but like not enough to keep to like think that something's wrong. Yeah, really, until he sees the dinosaur.
Yeah. He's not of his right mind right now. Yeah.
And then so from here we jump into this whole giant italicized section of the storytelling, where we go back to a time when Jake was young, and this like reminded me so much of the first time we met Jake way back in the Gunslinger. We met Jake, and then Roland hypnotized him to tell the story of his death, and we jumped into this section break that was all italicized to indicate it was coming from Jake's mind. And it had, these parenthetical interruptions that were coming from like the future version of Jake's mind or so. And the whole setup of this thing is basically identical to that. And it does feel like King is intentionally channeling that moment, like playing. We talked about it last week, that he's like playing the Dark Tower greatest hits, where we're going through these chapters and we're recalling events from the first few novels. We're saying, and we're echoing them in certain ways. We're twinning them in certain ways. Like, twinning has been such a potent image that we've used in this series so far. And it just reminded me very much of that first Jake moment.
Yeah. I totally agree after thinking about it, especially that like he seems to be invoking the backstories and the first moments that we spent with so many of these characters. And I wonder if we can set aside our, Lord of the Rings prediction method and try to just use our what happened previously in the Dark Tower prediction method from now on.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, if we're playing the Gunslinger greatest hits, Matt, you know how that book ends, right? So, do you want to make a prediction on if that scenario is going to replay itself?
Well, I mean, there's definitely going to be Roland sacrificing somebody in the Katet. Like, if I haven't said that before, I'll say it now.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to be Jake, because if he just sacrificed Jake again, I would be very sad, and I don't want to be sad. But like, it just seems like it's set up to be that, and like, it's not going to be good. It's going to be bad. It's going to make us sad. But I don't know whether it's going to be the complete damnation of his character or what exactly, or what form it's going to take. But I do hesitate to say we're doing the greatest hits of every character's intro, like including the ones that we didn't meet until Drawing of the Three. So I don't necessarily know if we're just tracking through the plot of the Gunslinger, but sure, we'll see.
Sure. All right. Just wanted to prod your brain a little bit on that.
Okay.
So in this italicized flashback, we see the first and foremost, and I think the main emotional core of this whole thing is this desperate, heartbreaking love that Jake has for Mrs. Greta Shaw, the housekeeper, the one that originally gave him the name Bama. It's so heartbreaking because like we see that Jake's memories of his parents are all bad, are all negative. He really, really didn't like them. And he almost like, again, to echo way back in the Gunslinger, he almost didn't even have the words to describe why he disliked them so much. But he loves this woman. And I think this reflects this idea that, you know, we said last week, Jake called Roland his true father. And I think this dislike of his parents maybe slots perfectly into this understanding that like these people were never really his parents, you know, like not in the grand cosmic scheme of things.
Yeah.
And this part in particular, though, like Greta Shaw says, "I hope you know I'm not your mother, Bama," she says, giving him a plate. And on the plate is a peanut butter, bacon, and banana sandwich with the crusts cut off as only Greta Shaw knows how to cut them off, because that is not my job description. And Jakey, only he's Bama here. He's Bama between them. Doesn't know exactly how to tell her he knows that, but he'll make do with her until the real thing comes along, or until he grows old enough to get over his fear of the death fly. This is a really great example of the type of writing we got going on here.
Yeah.
As well, like like he knows that. It's very much like, I think he's supposed to be like 4 years old here, or maybe a little older than that, but he's very young. And his brain speaks like someone who's very young. It processes like someone who's very young.
Yeah. I mean, I was literally thinking 4 or 5 year old, just because my kids are pretty young, and I'm very familiar with this kind of age and way of thinking, where it's like they're four in particular, which is actually the age of my youngest right now, is basically an age where their mind is actually quite agile and competent, but they're not usually not up to articulating things very, very clearly. And so you end up with someone who can understand very complicated things, but can't express very complicated things. And that really struck me as like what we're seeing here, where he's probably processing a lot of the depth of what Greta Shaw is saying here. Like, you know, like he's understanding almost on a very mature level the tragedy of this woman who loves me more than anyone else loves me is not my mom. Yeah. And my parents should love me more than this, but they don't. And he understands all of that. He just doesn't know how to say it. So. Yeah,
and that there's like that she does love him on some level, and she's good at her job, and she takes very good care of him, and she seems to genuinely care about him. But this is also just a job for her, and at the end of the day, she goes home, and this is not what he wants, and it's the only thing he can get, because he's getting nothing from his parents in this regard. It's really heartbreaking. It really is, and like there's a lot of, again, like we're doing things over again, and in last week we talked about Roland thinking about his mother and thinking about the nursery rhyme his mother told him that had Chisset, Chusset, Chasset. And in this week's reading, we get a song that Jake's mother used to sing to him. But what did this do? It scared him to death, because it told him about this fly that if you see it, you're going to die. And he took that literally and became terrified of the death fly forever. And it just shows how broken this relationship is. But there's Miss Greta Shaw, in which this relationship is pure and beautiful, and he's remembering this moment in which he was this as scared as he had ever been in his young life, and who was there to comfort him? It was Greta Shaw.
Yeah.
So there's so much intentional callback to his to Roland stuff here. And here's another one that I want to get into. So there's this quote here: "There is a TV in his room, and every day while his folks are gone, he takes his after school snack in there and watches, and he hears her radio in the kitchen, always the oldies, always WCBS. And sometimes he hears Miss Greta Shaw singing along with the Four Seasons, Wanda Jackson Lee, Yeah, Dorsey. And sometimes he pretends his folks die in a plane crash, and she somehow becomes his mother, and she calls him poor little lad and poor little lost tyke, and then by virtue of some magical transformation, she loves him instead of just taking care of him, loves him the way he loves her. She's his mother, or maybe his wife. He's unclear about the difference between the two, but she calls him Bama instead of Sugar Love, his real mother, or Hotshot, his father." So I first of all, just like we were talking about, I love the writing here. It is doing this very Faulkner-esque stream of consciousness thing as Jake is reliving the terror of seeing the lost continent for the first time, and his love of Miss Greta Shaw, a love that he doesn't even fully understand yet. But it's beautiful writing. And like we talked about the Oedipal moment in Roland's story last week, right? Where he's remembering this moment where he wants to, defeat his father and marry his mother, and they will have children and they will be in love. And then he has Miss Greta Shaw, his first real mother figure, and he doesn't understand enough to know what the difference between motherly love and love of a wife is here, because he's so young. And so again, we're pinging these beats off of each other.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think, it's funny, we did call it Oedipal last week.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's not that that's the wrong word to use. It's just, I think it's less Oedipal and more just, we're talking about children who are so young and whose innocence is so complete that to them, it's just a pure like white love, where they don't even understand, they don't even conceptually understand the difference between a wife and a mother. It's just like, it's a woman who I love a lot, more than anything else, and who loves me more than anything else, and that's what they think a wife is. It's not that they want to bang their moms. It's just a reflection of the utter innocence of these, these two flashbacks of child characters.
Yeah. And I mean, I think anytime, the thing about literature is anytime you reference that image, like it's going to be called Oedipal, because that's just like, it's so ingrained in our culture now that we're doing an Oedipus reference here. But I agree with you. I mean, I think Roland is a little bit older than Jake when he was going through his stuff. And I think the Oedipal part of Roland has been much more explicit by the text. I think the text literally said that Susan taught him that this was an Oedipus complex. So I think that's a little more explicit, but I certainly agree with Jake here that this is not like he just doesn't understand what those words even mean, really. He just knows what he feels, and he's trying to put what he feels to words that grown-ups say, like wife. Like, what does a wife mean to a 4-year-old? I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's also pretty common for little kids to assume that they're going to marry for little boys to assume they're going to marry their sister, because that's their family, right? That's that's what that means. And you're like, okay, well, you're not going to feel that way later. And it's not like it hurts anything right now for you to be saying that, but yeah. But I mean, I think the important thing here is that Mrs. Greta Shaw is taking this motherly place, right? And she is comforting him in this moment where he is scared to death by these dinosaurs on this show. It even says in the parenthetical here that she resists discordia. That is her role here, and it gives her this like, not just an important role in the past of this child, but this like all-encompassing important role in the universe to like resist this small moment of discordia in the fear of this young child, and to be his parent almost, and to explain that they're just cartoons, and to help him get over his fear, which he eventually does. It's just this really beautiful moment, and it kind of breaks your heart because it's not his parents. It says a lot about the metaphysics of the story that just comforting a scared child constitutes resisting discordia. That's I'm gonna have to chew on that for a while. I think that's important to keep in mind. Cool.
But now the Tyrannosorbet, as it's pronounced, that's so perfect, is here again, and it's in front of him, and he's afraid again because we don't know what's going on here, but we do know one thing Jake is absolutely sure of. This thing can kill him, and it will kill him, and we have the low men chasing behind him as well. So he does what anyone would do in this situation. He switches his mind out with Oi, because that's the thing he can do. Oi controls Jake, and Jake controls Oi, of course.
Yeah, I mean, that's some pretty extensive use of the touch that we haven't really seen. Basically, we're establishing, you can sort of control someone's mind. At least here, Oi is, allowing it, and they have Kef and everything. But that's pretty. It seems pretty powerful, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
I love so the audiobook reader actually says Tyrannosorbet, even though clearly it says
really?
sorbet. But Tyrannosorbet does sound like a more plausible mispronunciation. But I also enjoy Tyrannosorbet. I love that the Tyrannosaurus, like the word Tyrannosorbet comes off as terrifying. Like in the moment, like it's a silly word, but you're in Jake's head, and Jake finds the Tyrannosorbet terrifying. And so you find the Tyrannosorbet terrifying, even though it's being called a Tyrannosorbet. And also it's described in this, really kind of vivid and unsettling way. So, like just we've been on kind of this breakneck, like completely, you're just completely absorbed in the writing. You're still in this like stream of consciousness thing. And then this horrifying Tyrannosaurus monster steps out in front of you. And it's a terrifying moment.
Do you remember the first time that you saw the word of the thing that your parents were calling sherbet your entire life, and you were like, what the fuck? Because I distinctly have that memory. Because my parents pronounced it sherbet my entire life, and then I looked at the word written out, and I'm like, that's not what that says at all, Mom.
I don't remember that moment, but I remember that the whole matter of spelling of sorbet versus sherbet, and you're just like, okay,
how did they do?
Whatever.
How did you do that?
yeah. Why do we even have to use these? Why can't we just call it like frozen fruit snack?
Yeah,
this is behind us.
This is my mind trap. Is just the memories of sorbet versus sherbet and how they're apparently the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that happen to the American accent at some point, like the word wash, aka wash. Where
yeah.
But
no, I mean, I agree with you about the description of the Tyrannosaurus, and I mean, we didn't talk about it, but the thing I love is like that he realizes that he comes back and watches the same movie when he's 10 and realizes that the things look stupid and fake, but that's just part of being a kid, right? That these things scare you in a way you is non-repeatable. You can never understand. I can't think of one right now, but I had these movies that used to scare the crap out of me when I was a little kid, and it's nothing.
Yeah,
it's nothing.
My mom tells me that I was utterly terrified of Snuffleupagus, and that I would like run away or tell her to turn the TV off when Snuffleupagus came on. I don't remember this, but I totally buy it because Snuffleupagus is like a big looming dark shape.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's gonna fucking sneak up behind you and wrap you up with that Trunkalufficus.
Yeah, he seems sinister to me.
Yeah, it's up to no good.
Yeah.
Is that even still one of the... Is Snuffleupagus even still on Sesame Street? I don't even know.
I don't even know how to watch Sesame Street because I don't know how to watch PBS if you don't have a television in the classic sense.
I saw some Sesame Street stuff on the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and there were like 6 characters, and I was like, I don't know who that. I was like, okay, I got my Big Bird, I got my Elmo, and then there were like all these other ones. I was like, what? Who? Huh?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't know either, and I have kids. I just haven't been keeping up.
So, I mean, right now we're in the situation where Oi is in control of Jake's body, and Jake is in Oi's body, and so they're kind of trying to talk to each other, but like Oi can only talk in better formed words than he normally does, but still he's like saying short, like 1-syllable words, right? And Jake is trying to say complex words, but can only talk in barks. And it's this really wonderful, weird and wonderful moment.
It is great. They're also like, my take was that there was almost like a confusion between the two minds, like some losing of a boundary between them. I like that. I like that stuff too.
They've literally body swapped. They Freaky Friday'd, but there is like some just general blending that happens whenever you just like merged your mind enough to just flip bodies like that.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, it really was. So Oi clumsily leads the two of them through the mine trap and out the other side just as the low men catch up. So it's very, very close, but the two of them do it together. And you're so happy that Oi has once again saved the day because Oi is the best. But he doesn't like being in that human. Doesn't like it.
Yeah, it's so wobbly.
Yeah. How can you stay balanced with those 2 legs?
Yeah, this is ridiculous. I love that.
Yeah. So then King jumps us from Jake into the mind of the leading pursuer of the band of Crimson King people. This is Flaherty, a human from Boston in service to the Crimson King. He's the only one that is a human. Everyone else is either Taheen or Lowman, but he's the only human, and he's in charge. And he helps us understand exactly what the mind trap is. We kind of use this point of view to explain to the reader what the mind trap is. It's this thing that feeds on your imagination to make the things you fear real. And he sees a dragon. I love this as another beat on our talking about like the power of creation, right? The idea that imagination is strong enough to kill in this regard, that they've weaponized imagination, but also, you know, strong enough to save, right? Because we've talked about the power of Stephen King and his ability to create, and how that power is one of the things holding the universe up.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It also reminds me a bit of Susanna's power of, you know, seeing things so strongly that they become real.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of running off of the same idea, but weaponizing it in a bad way, because that's what the bad guys do.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if you know, the more we learn about the Crimson King, the more this sort of thing is kind of his shtick, like creation, but twisted to be, you know, murderous and destructive.
Yeah. Well, it fits right in. I mean, I love the Susanna comparison because it fits right in with that. But Susanna seems to be, you know, not technologically. It's her magic power, right? We joked about that when we talked about it. It's her magic power. And on the other side, this is just a technology. It is just a machine that was built that does this. And so that's, again, showing our big dichotomy of magic versus machine.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
And of course, because it's a machine, you can just blow it up. So that's what our pursuers do. They shoot out the projectors and disable the device, and then chase after Jake, chanting a Marine Corps chant about drinking his blood and eating his balls, which is like so vulgar. And I love Jake's reaction to it. It's like brag, brag, brag. Jake has like that. I love Jake because like he's both like still a kid that's like in over his head still, like, and like he's overwhelmed at this moment, but he's also like really battle hardened. So he's just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But that is what this next section, I think it really, really zooms in on here, because we have this moment where he says, brag, 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 he thought, but tried to run faster anyway. He was alarmed to find he couldn't. Doing the mind swap with Oy had tired him out quite a little bit. No. Roland had taught him that self-deception was nothing but pride in disguise, and indulgence to be denied. Jake had done his best to heed this advice, and as a result admitted that being tired no longer described his situation. The stitch in his side had grown fangs that had sunk deep into his armpit. So our boy is just exhausted, and I love this. He turns to his father figure to get the advice that allows him to admit that he's just fucking exhausted.
Yeah. I love the kind of the gunslinger ethos, that these hard-edged sayings and bits of wisdom that are scattered throughout this saga. It seems like something Jocko Willink would say. Self-deception is pride in disguise. That's
the Marine guy that says this.
He's a Navy SEAL. Yeah.
Who did that alarm for you that didn't work, where he just yelled at you?
It worked for a while. Everything works for a while, Scott.
Sure.
Yeah. No, he did an album called Psychological Warfare, which is just him talking to you and explaining why you're a piece of shit if you don't do the things that you know that you should do. It's great.
That kind of stuff just does not work on me. My reaction to that kind of stuff is just like, hey, fuck you, I'll do what I want. It's not the way I'm motivated at all. Yeah. But I understand it. Yeah. And I wanted to, like, I thought about this for a while, because like Roland has deceived before, but I do think that self-deception is something that we do not see Roland do very often, right? Like if Roland's honest with anyone, it's with himself, right? When he knows he's gonna sacrifice Jake at the end of the Gunslinger, he's just completely honest with himself. He's honest with himself about why he's lying to his quartet. He seems just very upfront with himself about what he's willing to do and what he isn't willing to do. So I do think that's a core of Roland's character that we have seen throughout the series.
Yeah, I think that's true. I'm trying to decide if I 100% agree. I think what happens is sometimes he's wrong, but being wrong is not the same as being dishonest.
Right. Right.
And yeah, he's And he's not always honest with his quartet. That's true too.
No, but this is self-deception.
Yeah.
It's only self-deception. That's nothing but pride in disguise.
Yeah.
Normal deception is fine.
Yeah. I'm trying to decide if his behavior during the Magus story was self-deception in the same sense. I think just being love struck is not really the same thing as self-deception. I don't know. I'm just
that is a core of his past, right? And so you could argue that that is the event that drilled that lesson into him.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah,
that a pre-Magus Roland maybe would have not given that advice, or would have given the advice or parroted the advice, but not really believed and lived that advice. And I think that is one of the lessons that he takes away from that experience.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we can give this one to Roland. Yes.
All right. We don't give him much, but we'll give him this one.
Yeah.
So Jake finally gets to the door. This is door number 9, the one that Susanna is patiently waiting behind where we left her last week. And he screams, "Susanna, if you're there, let me in." "Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin," he heard his father say, and his mother, much more gravely, as if she knew storytelling was serious business. "I heard a fly buzz when I died." I love this because it's his parents. It's one thing. So this is his last moment to escape. And who are there? What are the voices he hears standing between him and that escape? His parents. His parents, once again, his old, we can't even call it a quartet because it wasn't really, but these old figures in his life that he never liked from the beginning. Like, I think one of Jake's earliest defined attributes was his hatred of these kind of professional people like that his parents were.
Yeah.
And they are the last thing that stands between him and reuniting with his found family. Some would argue his true family, right? And I just love that touch. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically hearing their voices as like the villainous, frightening voices of his subconscious. And yeah, like you said, it's his mother and father. They shouldn't be. Yeah. They shouldn't be taking those roles. It's sad.
Yeah, it is. It is. Susanna eventually responds and gives him the password, which of course is Chasset. And when he says it on his side of the door clicks open, and Oy and Jake tumble through, safe from their pursuers, because none of the Crimson King's men know the password.
Yeah. I admit I did not really understand or guess that the solution to the Chasset riddle would just be, you have to say it from the other side of the door.
Well, the door only goes one way, man.
That's true. I don't think I grasped that this was the same door, I guess, is what I was missing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what happened was the door that Susanna took broke, right? That's what they told us last week. The door that Susanna took when she was being pulled down there with Mia broke on the way. And so like the door has like a fail-safe mechanism when all the doors in the area, they route to this one now. Because remember, this is just technology stuff. So when the door broke on the FedEx side, the remaining door in the Dixie Pig routed to this door number 9. And the password for that door was special, and it was Chasset. And that's why none of the Crimson King people know what it is, because they don't understand what's going on here.
I gotcha.
But Mia did, and Mia saved the day. Mia.
And it makes sense that she would, because she's from there. Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Why she would have the knowledge. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Because she's hung out there for thousands and thousands of years.
Exactly. Yeah. I've never put these things together until now, honestly. But yeah, I get it now. Because I was like, why would Mia know the password? No, this is FedEx. This is the FedEx system that she's familiar with. So yeah. Okay.
So our chapter ends with this wonderful Stephen King line, Matt. "At the very last minute, the boy and the bumbler had eluded them. For yet a while longer, the core of Roland's quartet remained unbroken."
God damn it. God damn it, Stephen.
Don't you love it though? Because it perks your ears up a little bit. You're just like, what?
Yeah. I mean, yet again, and I think this is going to continue this week, is he's telling us a story, and when you're telling somebody a story, you're going to throw stuff in, especially at the end of a chapter like this. You're going to be like, so, he would live another day, but perhaps not. Yeah.
All right, so we begin chapter 6, titled On Turtleback Lane. Chapter 6 begins with Stephen King talking about how beautiful Maine is. I think Stephen King really likes Maine. Matt, I don't know if you knew that, but he really does. So the chapter starts, "See this, I do beg ya, and see it very well, for it's one of the most beautiful places that still remain in America. I'd show you a homely dirt lane running along a heavy wooded switchback ridge in western Maine. Its north and south ends spilling onto Route 7, about 2 miles apart. Just west of this ridge, like a jeweler's setting, is a deep green dimple in the landscape. At the bottom of it, the stone in the setting, is Kezar Lake. Like all mountain lakes, it may change its aspect half a dozen times in the course of a single day, for here the weather is beyond prankish. You could call it half mad and be perfectly accurate. The locals will be happy to tell you about ice cream snow flurries that came to this part of the world once in late August, that would be 1948, and once spang on the glorious 4th, 1959. They'll be even more delighted to tell you about the tornado that came blasting across the lake's frozen surface in January of 1971. Sucking up snow and creating a whirling mini blizzard that crackled with thunder in its middle. Hard to believe such crazy Jane weather, but you could go and see Gary Barker if you don't believe me. He's got the pictures to prove it."
Yes.
I love this. Totally unnecessary for me to read that because it's totally unnecessary to our plot, but I love it.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is one of the characteristic things about the Dark Tower is that we have our author telling us how awesome Maine is with full self-consciousness of the fact that it's Stephen King, the author who has inserted himself into the story, who lives in Maine. It's completely insane. And of course, again, we have, the tone of a man telling us a story right here. The last chapter ended with it. This one basically begins with it. He's relaying something he saw or heard, and he's telling you, right? He's addressing you. Yeah. He's saying, hey, see this, I do beg you, and see it very well. He's addressing us. He's saying, hey, pay attention. I'm going to tell you this cool thing now about Maine. I really do think this book is doing that more than the others did. The others did it some, but this book has been doing it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it is certainly not the first time he's done this throughout the course of the series, but I agree with you that it seems to be coming more and more. And it kind of makes sense in a book that has now explicitly made its author part of the story, that this would also be part of it. This direct reference and direct conversation with us, the reader.
Yeah. It's also interesting that he starts off saying, hey, look, it's this beautiful little piece of land, one of the most beautiful places that still remain in America, which honestly, I think America is a pretty beautiful country. It's a lot of beauty around this country. But I get it. You love Maine. That's fine.
He does. He loves Maine.
But then it immediately zags. It spends a few sentences explaining the beautiful setting, and then it zags into not only tell you about the absolutely crazy, weird weather in these parts, and that kind of pushes you a little bit into a different zone of like thinking about it as kind of a fey place, kind of a borderline magical place where, what kind of place is this that would have these really almost unbelievable stories of what the weather does.
Yeah, but you can see Gary Barker. He's got the pictures to prove it.
That's right.
And Eddie describes the scene now because throughout the course of this chapter, there's a storm blowing in, and Eddie describes the lake as a zombie's eye, which is just it's a wonderful description. It's like, because it's so black, it's solid black at this moment. I really love that. I really jumped on that in a way that I'd never have in the past, like a zombie's eye. That's so good.
Yeah. More than foreboding, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So they're heading up to 19 Turtleback Lane because, of course, and I guess we should say that Kezar Lake, Matt, is a real place in Maine. King is playing fast and loose with some of the geography here. They're like, some of the towns are real towns in Maine. Some of the roads are real roads in Maine, but some of them are not in the right place. Turtleback Lane is not a real road, but there is a road that runs along the east side of the lake, like exactly where Turtleback Lane would be. So he's being close, and like you get the idea that these descriptions are coming from like a personal eye, like he's seen this before and he's relaying it to you, even if some of the geography doesn't quite line up. But it's just some fun Maine info.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm Googling Kezar Lake now. There's a lot of lakes in these parts.
Yeah. If you go to like the southeast part of the lake, there's I think it's like Kezar Lake Road that runs right along the shore. And I think that's what Turtleback Lane is supposed to be.
Okay, that's cool.
But before they get to 19 Turtleback Lane, they've got to meet up with their friend John Cullum, and he's sitting there waiting for them outside number 13 Turtleback Lane. Here he is. It's their Dan Titty, Matt.
Yep.
And here's this description of him, which I love. Parked at the side of the road besides a side reading Beckhart 13 was a familiar Ford pickup truck, and an even more familiar man leaning nonchalantly against the truck's rust-spotted long bed, dressed in cuffed blue jeans and an ironed blue chambray shirt buttoned all the way to the close-shaved, waddled neck. He also wore a Boston Red Sox cap tilted just a little to one side, as if to say, "I got the drop on you, partner." He was smoking a pipe, the blue smoke rising and seeming to hang suspended around his seamed and good-humored face on the breathless pre-storm air. I love this description. This is just like an old dude in Maine, like an old country bumpkin in Maine who 2 days ago was nobody important, but now like he gets this badass gunslinger-esque description. And of course he's wearing a blue chambray shirt because it's Stephen King. But I love it. Like he's wearing this tilted cap and he's smoking his pipe and he's just a fucking badass.
Yeah. It's awesome. I mean, I think the crooked hat saying "I got the drop on you, partner" is literally textually saying he's basically a gunslinger. He got the drop on them, actually.
Yeah.
It's so good. And also, we haven't talked about this in a while, but we've noticed that elderly people in this story tend to be like really, really good. Like I'm thinking of the wise old elves mainly.
Sure.
But I'm having a hard time thinking of like an elderly person in the story who is not a clear-cut good guy. I mean, the exceptions, the only exceptions I could think of would be characters who are old but also like magical, like Rhea and Walter.
Sure.
And Walter, he's kind of a weird special case. I don't know. It's just yet again we have like we meet our super competent, super good person, and yet again they're a very old person.
Yeah, and even like Rhea, I understand she's an older woman, but I always kind of felt, and I don't even know if this is supported by the text, but I always kind of felt that she wasn't as old as she looks because she's just like been supernaturally aged by her magics and stuff. So I never think of her as an old woman. I just think of her as a rotting woman,
Yeah. Well, she speaks and acts in a very childish way, too.
Very true. Yeah. So the gunslingers get together with John and decide to have a little bit of a palaver. But before they do, Cullum tells them that Jack Andolini and his band have been taken captive by the police. And I just wanted to point out this moment because it just seems so wonderful to me. Eddie collapsed back on one of Cy Beckhart's prim shaker chairs, turned his head up to the ceiling, and bellowed laughter at the rafters. When he was tickled, Roland reflected, no one could laugh like Eddie Dean, at least not since Cuthbert Allgood had passed into the clearing. I really love this because not only are we doing this thing where Roland is thinking about his old friends more and more and the past more and more again, but King has what has to be intentionally, in my mind, removed us from Roland's mind more and more in these last few books. We are in Roland's head less than I think we've ever been in this series. And this chapter is basically entirely from Eddie's perspective, more or less, except for little brief moments right here, little brief moments where we get a glimpse into what is going on in the head of the old feller. And every time it's something like this, where he's once again doing the thing where Eddie reminds him of Cuthbert. And he's for a character who, as we mentioned in the very first book, said he wasn't the kind of person to look back. He seems to be looking back a lot.
It seems like every time we look into his head, he's connecting something to his past. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also I wanted to just comment on this scene that you pulled out, because I think it's just a great example of an element of good writing that I guess I feel is a bit under discussed or under noted maybe.
Okay.
Like, I just think King is keeping a really good track of where your head is at in terms of like keeping track of story threads, because, for us, it's been a while. I feel like it's been a few weeks since the
ambush.
Since the ambush,
it's been probably about a month at least.
Yeah. But like a normal person reading this series in a normal way is going to, I think, in the back of their mind, be thinking, "Hey, where did Jack Candellini go?" Because like that was never really tied up, and he and his posse were hunting Roland and Eddie, and I think it was subconsciously gnawing at me. I think maybe for people reading more normally, it would be consciously gnawing at them, and I think that's just a good sign of what a good storyteller King is. That he's generally going to address these threads and tie them off. And even if the answer is nothing comes of it, Jack Candellini gets arrested and it amounts to nothing, but at least he makes sure that it's addressed, because I think a storyteller who leaves such threads unaddressed will eventually lose your trust. And I don't even think you'll be sure why. You won't necessarily know that, you lost trust in the storyteller because of all of the threads. You might start thinking things like, "Oh, the story is just so muddled. I can't keep track of what I'm supposed to be caring about." And I think a lot of times it's the absence of this thing that King is doing very well here.
Yeah. Interesting. I never thought about it that way, but I think you're right. I mean, honestly, it has never gnawed at my mind what happened to Jack Candellini. I just didn't care. But I do think you're right that what I appreciate the most about it is not only does King like pick up this thread and tie it off, but he takes that tie off moment and he uses it to tell more information about his characters, right? It's like not enough to just tie off that thread and make it neat. He takes that moment and employs it to say something about Roland and say something about Eddie, and also say something about John Cullum, and that he's perceptive enough to know that Eddie would get a fucking kick out of hearing that he's just like, one of the recurring beats of this moment between these three characters is they've only known each other for like 2 hours, and yet they feel like they know each other. He feels like he knows Eddie and Roland and has known them for a long time, and they the same with him. And I think that's another little character beat that says like, "I know you, Eddie. I know you'll get a kick out of this," because of course he would, because he's Eddie.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I agree completely that just kind of rotely closing all of the open parentheses in the story is actually quite boring and sterile. But like just as you point out, he's doing several things here at the same time.
Yeah, everything you can do in writing can do multiple things at the same time.
Yeah, if
you want it to. It's harder, but it's also very functional and makes for a better story. 100%. Yeah. And I think King is very good at doing double duty. It's the duality, right? It's the twin thing.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. It's everything.
Yep. Yeah. So Eddie then proceeds to tell John Cullum the entire story of the Dark Tower series thus far. It takes 90 minutes for him to go through it all, which is like way less than your audiobooks. So they probably just totally skipped over the Roland and Susan and Mage's story, which is just really disappointing.
Yeah. I mean, imagine trying to cram the story of Blaine the Mono into like 10 minutes.
Okay. Touche.
Yeah.
But the weirdest thing about this, and the most wonderful thing about this, is John Cullum just believes it. He just believes it all. He's just told this insane, crazy story, and he's like, "Yeah, okay, I believe you. I believe you."
Yeah,
it's really great.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think at this point, I'm not surprised by this sort of thing anymore, because there's all of the magical telepathy and fate and stuff. But and
just think of how exhausting at this point of the series, we're on book 7, crazy shit has happened. And then if you decide to make this all important character that the book has been pretty clearly explicit, like is the only person that could help him out, but you have to have this whole chapter where you try to convince him, like that's boring. Yeah. We don't need to do that anymore. We're beyond that thing. And so they just tell him, and he's like, "Yep, got it. Okay, I'm on board." And he even repeats it back to them, and he's talking about Stephen King, and he says, "King doesn't exist in any of these other worlds?" John asked. "Almost surely not," Roland said. "Even if he does," Eddie put in, "what he does in them doesn't matter. This is the key world. This and the one Roland came from. This world and that one are twins." So there's our twin factor again, Matt, explicitly tying key world and midworld together in a way that has never been explicitly stated. Like, we understood. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that not explicitly, but I feel like we have talked about this idea that we know that Midworld and this world are important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because we knew that the world Eddie comes from doesn't seem as important. And we've had a lot of textual examples why this world is important, why this world is the key world. But like, there was always that little bit of confusion. It's like, okay, well, what does that make Roland's world? Like, Roland's world obviously seems to be important because they need to be in Midworld to get to Endworld, to get to the Dark Tower. They seem to need to be there. So why is that world important? Well, it's because it's the twin of the key world, that these two are bound and linked together in this thing.
I just thought of a really wacky, metaphysical, and difficult to articulate mental model for this. Okay. So like I was thinking, like, why is it that on Earth there's like, you know, thousands of Earths, and Callahan travels between them, you know, but they're all basically Earth. They're all very similar to the key world with, you know, small differences between them, differences in the money, for example.
Sure.
And then we have Midworld, which is just like radically different. Like it doesn't seem like Midworld is just an alternate Earth at all. It seems like it's just a different world that follows different rules. It seems to like not even have north, south, east, west cardinality. Like, it, for all we know, it's literally not even on a spherical planet. It's got this whole tower thing going on. It's got like, you know, different speeds of time as you go in toward the center. It's just a very, very different world. And then I was like, what if like literally going from, you know, from Midworld to, you know, or from Outworld to Midworld to Endworld. Is that it? Is it Outworld? I don't remember.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, what if that's akin to going from like Eddie's world to the key world? Like in you know, Earths are stacked on top of each other dimension wise. Midworld is arranged in rings dimension wise.
Interesting. Okay. I like that. So you're saying like that Midworld and Endworld are literally different worlds, just organized differently.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. I don't know if we've had anything that could explicitly contradict that, where I could be like, "No, you're wrong." So you're right.
It's a very soft and fuzzy thing that I'm saying anyway. So
yeah, but I think the world is designed to be a little bit soft and fuzzy. You know, like there aren't explicit answers to any of these things. I don't think.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a little bit loose. We talked about that last week a little bit. That it's supposed to be a little bit less strict.
Yeah,
this kind of stuff.
It's fun to think about the ways in which they're twins, though, and that's one thing I was thinking of is like,
yeah, no, I like that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So they give John the cross that Roland just remembered was important last week, and tell him that if he rubs the cross in front of Moses, something that would call back a memory that will link him with Susanna will happen, and that it could possibly get him on board. Then, as the palaver concludes, they ask the most important question. Eddie asks, "But why would you do this? I have to know that. Why would you take all this on for two men you just met?" And then I want to read this part because it's probably one of the most important things we're talking about today. John thought it over. He touched the cross he wore now and would wear until his death in the year 1989. The cross given to Roland by an old woman in a forgotten town. He would touch it just that way in the years ahead when contemplating some big decision. The biggest might have been the one to sever Tet's connection with IBM, a company that had shown an ever-increasing willingness to do business with North Central Positronics, or preparing for some covert action, the firebombing of Sombra Enterprises in New Delhi, for instance, in the year before he died. The cross spoke to Moses Carver and never spoke again in Cullum's presence, no matter how much he blew on it. But sometimes, drifting to sleep with his hand clasped around it, he would think, "'Tis a sigil, dear, something that came from another world." If he had regrets towards the end, other than about some of the tricks which were filthy indeed and had cost more than one man his life, it was that he never got a chance to visit the world on the other side, which he glimpsed on one stormy evening on Turtleback Lane in the town of Lovell. From time to time, Roland Sigil sent him dreams of a field filled with roses and a sooty black tower. Sometimes he was visited by terrible visions of two crimson eyes floating unattached to any body and relentlessly scanning the horizon. Sometimes there were dreams in which he heard the sound of a man relentlessly winding his horn. From these later dreams, he would awake with tears on his cheeks, those of longing and loss and love. He would awake with his hand closed around the cross, thinking, I denied Discordia and regret nothing. I have spat in the bodiless eyes of the Crimson King and rejoice. I threw my lot with the Gunslingers Quartet and the White and never questioned the choice. Now, he said, you boys want all the right things. I can't put it any clearer than that. I believe you. He hesitated. I believe in you. What I see in your eyes is true. It's such a powerful moment. And I know that was long, but we go through the entire life history of John Cullum in this one moment before it has even happened.
I mean, it's long. It's long in relative to what we usually read, but it's really like a page basically, and it's incredibly dense, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like this high speed, high altitude summary of all of the James Bond shit that he gets up to, and that's just a small piece of it, right? It kind of blows past that and then talks about how he regrets maybe some of the lengths that they went to in the course of doing it, but at the same time, he knows that he had to do it because he's you know, this knight fighting on behalf of the White against the Crimson King, and you know, he doesn't get to see Midworld, but he has sent visions of the Tower, which I think is fascinating because even Susanna hasn't been given visions of the Tower, but he's given visions of the Tower. He's got the eyes of Sauron, you know, like pursuing him personally. Apparently, like it really seems like I don't know if it's the fact that he's this kind of important person or if it's just the fact that he has this cross. The cross never seemed that important to me until now. But if I had to choose, I would say it's because he's who he is, not necessarily because the cross is, you know, this super magical item. But
sure.
Yeah, I don't know if that's your interpretation as well. But
yeah, I think he's a very important person to the Quartet, and so anyone that's important to the Quartet is going to be an enemy of the Crimson King. But he seems like the fact that all he can do to him is spook him in his dreams, right?
Yeah.
And it's completely ineffectual, right? Because he spits in the bodiless eyes of the Crimson King. Yeah, I mean, I love this. Like, it's this beautiful life that we know we'll never get to see, really, because our characters walk through the portal at 19 Turtleback Lane and go to 1999. And we know that John Cullum in 1999 is 10 years gone. So it's not like they're going to get to meet up with John again and be like, oh, John, thanks so much. And like have this moment where he, at the end of his life, like gets to meet the men that changed the direction of the end of his life so dramatically. No, that doesn't happen. He dies in 1989 after doing everything he was asked to do. And as we see, doing it well, succeeding. And we understand maybe now that the building that sits at the Rose is the building of the Ted Corporation, is what John Cullum helped build. And it's powerful and it's wonderful. And I regret nothing. Like, imagine being able to say that at the end of your days, right? Like, I threw in my lot with all that is good and true and holy and wonderful in this world. And I had to do some bad stuff along the way, which is, I think everyone in our life along the way does some bad stuff. Hopefully we don't firebomb buildings. Like, hopefully you and I can get out of this life without doing anything like that. But
good so far.
Yeah. 35 years down, doing good. But I denied Discordia and regret nothing. I'd love to be able to say that at the end of my life. Yeah,
I really like that. And I feel, you know, like you said, we're saying goodbye to him. Basically, we're really about to be done with John Cullum, and we know it. The book is very clear with it, but it doesn't feel tragic at all. It feels like, you know, this guy's already elderly. I don't know exactly how old he is. I don't know if the book tells us that, but he's already elderly, and then he's going to go on and be this, you know, basically this very important hero for the remainder of his days. And it all feels very, you know, good. Like, it feels like this was a good life.
And this is one of those things that I think, like, Stephen King's habit of winking at future stuff in the middle of present stuff allows him a way to, like, tell this story, right? And I think, like, he's used to in the middle of a sentence saying something like, and then John Cullum died 10 years later, right? And I think because he's so used to having that kind of Stephen Kingism that we've been talking about since this series started, I think that allows his mind to make this leap to where like, oh, this is the perfect point. When Eddie Dean asks him why, this is the perfect point to detach ourselves from time and just run through the life of John Cullum right before he explains rather simply in the present, because you're right, because I believe in you. Yeah. And that's going to motivate all the stuff that we just got to read. And I don't know, like, I think an author who was much more concerned about spoilers or mystery or keeping things in the dark from its readers and using powerful reveals versus using just like out of the blue, and this was the last day they ever saw him type writing, would not have maybe thought to do it in this manner. And I think this is just a beautiful, beautiful way of saying goodbye to John Cullum.
Yeah. I mean, I feel maybe this is in my mind because I was just talking about it, but this to me feels like it's kind of the same thing of, you know, closing the parentheses, tying up the loose end, where we're not going to see John Cullum again. And maybe part of our mind would have wondered, well, maybe we are going to see him again. What does he get up to? What is his life going to be like? And King is, he's like, preemptively like, okay, you're not going to see him again. You're not. He dies before you can possibly see him again. But here's some of the stuff that he does so that you won't wonder. Yeah. And then that's tied off for you, and you can move on without kind of holding on to that thread. Because I do think this is a thing that King does. I think that he pays attention to like, what are the things that the reader is probably keeping in their mind as like, well, we haven't got the resolution of that thing yet. Because that's what writing is it's like setting things up and paying them off at the most fundamental level. We've said that many times. Sure. And when something is set up and you don't feel like it's been paid off, it just feels unresolved and it doesn't feel good. So
yeah, definitely. All right, well, say goodbye, John Cullum. We're never going to see him again. Or will we?
You son of a bitch.
So the palaver ended, the three head up to Kara Laughs, which is the name of the house at 19 Turtleback Lane. This, Matt, is actually a small reference to Stephen King's novel Bag of Bones, which is a book he wrote in the 90s. The protagonist of that novel lives at a lake house entitled Sarah Laughs. So different levels of the tower, slightly different names there.
Love it.
It's one of those references I don't mind throwing at you because it's not really a spoiler to anything. It's just fun. It's just fun stuff. Also, Sarah Laughs is like a biblical story, but maybe we'll get into that if we ever talk about Bag of Bones.
Yeah, cool. I don't know what that is, so sounds good.
But in this moment, Roland straps on his gun and he tells Eddie to put on his. And I love this. Strap on your gun, Eddie, Roland says, holding out the revolver with the worn sandalwood grips. Mine. Now he calls it mine. Eddie felt a small chill.
It's awesome. Took a whole series of books to get here, but it's a powerful moment. There's a lot of powerful moments in here. Some people say to use as few words as possible when writing, and those people are joyless word misers. Because I love that it's called the revolver with the worn sandalwood grips. Not just here, but fairly often, because it could just be the revolver, right? But no, King wants you to visualize it. He wants you to feel it. He wants it to be like this tactile experience. It's the revolver with the worn sandalwood grips.
Yeah. I mean, it's the worn grips because it's been in Roland's hands for so long, because it's been part of Roland's body, an extension of his body for so long. And I think that helps sell the fact that him saying, Eddie, this is yours now. This is your gun. This is not mine. It's yours. It helps sell that whole moment. And it's doing double duty. Words can do. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, because it's, we're reminding you of the importance of this revolver just by how we describe it. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So as they walk towards this beautiful bright light coming from 19 Turtleback Lane, it's a magic portal, and they realize it's a magic portal to wherever they want to go. It's one of those. Since it's not technological, they can control where it goes, and where they want to go is New York City, 1999, underneath the Dixie Pig. And then we get this moment. So came, although they did not know it, which was likely more mercy than such as they deserved, the death sentence of Flaherty and the Tahine Lamla and their quartet.
That's great.
Yeah. So and then we'll get to see the actual death of them. But one of those wonderful moments where like, okay, I think we got some stuff to finish off. And then just by saying that, they've because it's not even a fight. When we get to the fight, it's not even a fight. It's just nothing. They just kill all these people like they're nothing.
Yeah. King didn't really spoil anything, did he?
No. So as they walk towards the portal, they see hundreds of walk-ins, thousands of walk-ins walking in and out of these portal between this world and midworld and many worlds. And I think this is a good moment to kind of step back and talk about portals in the Dark Tower, right? Because we've got a lot of them, right? We have doors that are magical in nature, like the doors that drew, and those are doors that allow you to go in and out both ways. We have the artificial technological doors that you only go one way and seem very unsteady and could have you end up in Todash space. We have thinnies, which a thinny, we're not exactly sure. Sometimes thinnies like will go between worlds, as we saw in Wizard and Glass. Sometimes a thinny like we saw in Magus will maybe just go right to Todash space, and maybe that's what was pulling people into it. It was going right into whatever monsters live in that Todash space. And then we have this, which is kind of like a magic door and kind of like a thinny, but also seems something a little unique that we haven't quite seen before.
Yeah, you're right, because it isn't just the normal rules of the thinny, right? It's
no.
I was gonna say like, well, this could just be a different kind of thinny, because thinnies, every thinny we've seen has been a bit different, I feel. But yeah, this one lets you, it takes you where you want to go, right? And that's totally unique.
Mm-hmm.
And also just the fact that there's all these other people here. It's like this is some sort of nexus of transit between worlds. It's almost like this is the magic equivalent of Fedic, in a sense.
Oh, interesting. I like that. And I mean, it's right near where Stephen King is, right? Our man holding up one of the final beams. So it makes sense that it's in this particular area. Although why 19 Turtleback Lane, besides the fact that it's 19 and Turtleback, we don't necessarily know why they're in particular. But what I like about it is like, yeah, I mean, it could be a form of Todash, it could be a form of Thinny, it could be just another version of a door that we've seen. We're so used to the fact that just portals between worlds and thin spots between worlds create these things, and this is just one that seems good in a way that the other ones have been bad. And this is what it looks like. It looks like this beautiful, like awe-inspiring white light that almost that John Cullum almost walks into and would have if Roland hadn't been like, sorry, your time in the story's done, buddy. You got to stay here.
Yeah. He regrets. Yeah, he regrets that he didn't get to go planeswalking. But
yeah. Well, I mean, shoot, I'd want to too. I mean, imagine if you're like driving down a country road and you see this beautiful light with like people walking in and out it. I'd want to go check that out.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's move on to chapter 7, entitled Reunited. This is a very short, quick chapter, but it's a chapter of happy reunions. And we start this thing off with Roland and Eddie showing up behind Flaherty and his agents, and they just blow them all away. Like we talked about this before. Here's what happened: is our dude made the mistake of insulting Roland's mother, and
there wasn't going to be any way out of it. But I think he at least got his dig in, and then Roland was like, "All right, well, yeah." Time to end this.
Yeah, he didn't even let him finish his sentence. And then, of course, like we have the Taheen is the only one left, and he tosses his gun aside and says, "Mercy," and Roland's just like, "Nope."
Yeah. Yeah, which that's interesting, because for a second I thought maybe they would, right? Like they try to get information out of him, but he's just like, "No, you're dead." Yeah. Bye.
I mean, they chose to come here. They could have gone any place and time in the world, and they chose to come here specifically to wipe these people out.
Yeah.
Because I mean, these are the folks. These are part of the same folks that killed our pair Callahan. Yeah. So you don't get no mercy for you, bud.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of liked the Taheen, that guy though, because I liked the moment where he was like, "I'm gonna." I don't know. I liked his disposition. He was. Yeah, not that I'm sad to see him go, but he was interesting. He was an interesting villain.
Yeah, I mean, there's this moment at the beginning of this chapter where we start in his head, right? Where he's like, "Oh, Flaherty's gonna blame this on me, and he's gonna kill me," and like, so he's ready to go out swinging as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like it's a tiny little insignificant dynamic that doesn't really matter, but it helps characterize these people a little bit before we blow their heads off. And it's fun. It's fun. I love the cuts to the villains arguing. Very Tolkien, by the way, cutting to the villains arguing amongst themselves. It's a very fun little thing that King likes to do at times.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I just like learning that like inside the Taheen's head, it's like, oh, this is just a dude. He's a monster. He's got a monster head, but he's just a dude. So
yeah. So with these fools taken care of, they speak the magic word, and our quartet is reunited at last. And I mean, we're just going to finish this week up on just moment after moment of just beautiful reunions, and I love it. Like, I particularly love Eddie's reaction to just even hearing Susanna's voice again, because it says, "Eddie, sugar, is it you?" Eddie's head, which had seemed perfectly normal only seconds before, was suddenly too heavy to hold up. He leaned it against the door. His eyes were similarly too heavy to hold open, and so he closed them. The weight must have been tears, for suddenly he was swimming in them. He could feel them rolling down his cheeks, warm as blood, and Roland's hand touching his back. Ugh.
Ah, God. Yeah, I mean, we know he's been using all his willpower to get through this mission without just freaking out, for this whole book and the end of the last book. He's a gunslinger, and so he held it together. But in the end, when he finally gets back to her, he's still our lovable, human Eddie Dean. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, like at the very beginning of Song of Susanna, we saw how distraught and insane he was, and argumentative, and he's yelling at Roland and arguing. And then Ka had other plans for him, right? It swept him into this whole side story, and he recognized the duty he had to get all this stuff done. But yeah, in the back of his head the whole time, like Susanna, and he finally gets to her here, and it's wonderful. I just love. Sorry, go ahead.
I forgot there was a book between Wolves of the Kala and this one.
Yeah, there was a whole book there, Matt. We talked about it for a month and a half.
So Eddie's been looking for her for a whole book plus. Yes. There you go. Yeah, I misspoke. That's all.
I love this small little detail of Roland's hand touching his back, where his din is just fully aware of how much this moment means to Eddie. And it's just this small little gesture of support, right? This small little, I've got you. Like, I understand what you're going through. I'm here. I just love it. I love it.
Yes. Very humanizing gesture for Roland too. I mean, it is just, it is minor, but you know that it means a lot to both of them. So that's all that matters.
So then the door opens and the two gunslingers walk through it. Susanna and Eddie hug and kiss, but Roland and Jake just, I'm starting to talk like oi. Roland and Ake just look at each other.
Yeah.
Heil, Jake, Roland said. Heil, father. Will you call me so? Jake nodded. Yes, if I may. Such would please me ever, Roland said. Then, slowly, as one performs an action with which he's unfamiliar, he held out his arms. Looking up at him solemnly, never taking his eyes from Roland's face, the boy Jake moved between those killers' hands and waited until they locked at his back. He had dreams of this that he would never have dared to tell, which is a wonderful way of kind of completing Jake's story from the previous chapter, right? That this is a guy who has been on this eternal quest for a parental figure, and he couldn't get in his parents. He found Mrs. Greta Shaw, but knew, even as a young boy, knew that that's not what she was, that she was not that parent, that she was not that person for him.
Yeah.
And here he's found it.
Yeah.
Heil, father.
Right. And I love that we, we never explicitly see him, dreaming of Roland giving him a fatherly hug. But in this moment when he says that he's had these dreams, you can totally buy it, and that he's just kind of buried them because it's like too painful to even hope in the light of day.
Yeah. And it makes sense, right? Because like it's so buried in his subconscious that even in his point of view in the novels, that thought would not even spring onto the page.
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't even admit it to us, the reader.
Yeah. And also just the idea that the other thing that just, guts you is that, they haven't seen each other. They've both gone through these trials, especially Jake, since the last time he saw Roland, which really hasn't been that much time, but it's been just absolutely harrowing. And like, he's so vulnerable in this moment that there's no more filters. And so he just says, "Heil Father," like just almost casually, because he doesn't have any defenses left. And so it just comes out almost. And I love that. Yeah.
And we don't see it here, but you kind of get the idea that there is maybe a little bit of fear under Jake. Like, I agree. He says it because he's so tired. He's not thinking fully and he's lost his filter. But like, what if Roland had said, "Don't call me that," right? Yeah. And instead he said, "Such would please me ever," which is just so beautiful. And then he, as one performs an action with which he's unfamiliar, such a great touch. Is this a hug? Right. I'll try this.
Yeah, we've certainly never seen Roland hug anyone in a fatherly and understanding way. So.
But I love that King won't let you forget who Roland is, though, right? Like, even in the hug, the boy Jake moved between those killers' hands, right? Like, even in the hug, we can't let you forget who and what Roland is. And that's kind of how we finish this chapter, right? Like the last lines of this chapter are, "He stood with his head turned so his cheek rested against Roland's midsection. His eyes were closed. He could smell rain and dust and blood on the gunslinger shirt. He thought of his parents who were lost, his friend Benny, who was dead, the pair who had been overrun by all those from whom he had so long fled. The man he held had betrayed him once for the tower, had let him fall, and Jake couldn't say the same might not happen again. Certainly there were miles ahead, and they would be hard ones. Still, for now, he was content. His mind was quiet, and his sore heart was at peace. It was enough to hold and be held, enough to stand there with his eyes shut and to think, 'My father has come for me.'"
I'm not crying, you're crying.
Oh, that last line. Like this is the thought process of a mature person now. Yeah. Like, this is an adult feeling, right? We're like, I am fully aware that things are going to get hard. I'm fully aware that this man might betray me again. That this man might freely throw me down a shaft if it means getting to his tower. But right now, right here, I feel okay. And my dad's here. The thing that I've been searching for my entire life, and that I got pulled into the story to find and kept getting rejected from it. Here in this moment, I have it. And that's enough. That's enough.
Yeah.
My father has come for me.
Yeah. This is such a great ending to, a section, right? Mm-hmm. This is just a perfect, like, you'd be, even if this weren't the end of our week's reading, I would happily, like, just, quietly close the book and let soak in this moment, not really feeling a need to rush on to the next thing. It's just a great little, gift of quiet peace for you.
Yeah. We've got our 4-man band. I'm sorry, Oi. I'm so sorry, Oi. Our 5-man band is back together again. They are all complete again, for the first time in a book. It hasn't been until the end of Wolves of the Calla that our quartet has been all whole again.
Yeah.
And so we get that. And yeah, things are going to happen. Their journey is far from done. They've got many miles to go, but for now, they're whole again. For now, the reunion has happened. For now, everyone has gotten what he wants. Eddie and Susanna are reunited. Jake gets his father finally at last, and Roland gets his son, not the spider baby, but the other one.
Yeah. Speaking of twins, yeah.
Great end. All right, let's just toss the book away, and we don't have to read anything else because that's a happy ending.
Yeah.
Hooray!
I liked how the Dark Tower ended. I don't know what people.
All right. Of course, we know it's not the end, but it is the end for this week because that's all we're talking about this week. So let's move quickly on into our discussion questions, Matt. We actually had 2 this past week because I couldn't pick which one I liked more. So we had 2 questions that we asked, and people answered both of them, and we've selected some of each. The first question we have is the best earned redemptive moment in fiction. This was in honor of Per Callahan's wonderful, wonderful death and moment of earned redemption at the end of last week, or the beginning of last week's reading, actually.
Yeah, that's right.
I think you start with I'll this one because like 7,000 people said this answer.
Okay, I'm gonna read. I'm gonna read these all. Yeah. So, almost everyone said Zuko is the best earned redemptive moment in fiction, which is of course the correct answer.
I think we should say before we go into this, Matt, that
yes,
the nature of this question and the answers to this question mean that whatever we're talking about, whatever property we're talking about, must be spoiled a little bit, right? Because redemptions usually happen at the end of the arc, which usually happens at the end. So spoilers for Avatar, The Last Airbender coming up.
Yes, which is really, really good and worth watching. Uh-huh. And I honestly, I would say even if you are spoiled by this, still worth watching. So Complicated 9519 says he was on a rocky ledge when he first started shifting, but he did try his best even when the gang didn't trust him. Mm-hmm. It's true. Shortstop 88 says going into the third season of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Zuko had betrayed his uncle Iroh and the Avatar because he was told that he would be accepted by his father Ozai. Zuko spent the first half of the third season feeling an emptiness after returning home as the Prince of the Fire Nation. During the mid-season finale, Zuko realized that Ozai was planning on crushing the Earth Kingdom beyond hope, turning Zuko's time spent with the people of the Earth Kingdom into a weapon. He realized that his father needed to be stopped, and the only way to do so was by helping the Avatar defeat him. The second half of the season sees Zuko attempting to join the Avatar's group, and then convincing each of them of his loyalty to the Avatar through helping each of them. It wasn't until the finale of the show, when Zuko sees his uncle Iroh again. By this point, he has proven himself to be good, and he feels more whole than he had the entirety of the show. In the scene, Zuko apologizes for betraying Iroh. Zuko begs on his knees for Iroh to forgive him, and Iroh doesn't hesitate to pull him in and accept his mistake. This is an extreme contrast to the first season, which showed a flashback of Zuko begging Ozai for forgiveness for speaking out of turn, and Ozai choosing to scar him across the face. It's such a fantastic scene, but made better in comparison to Zuko's father. This also works great with this episode of Kingslingers, as we heard of Jake's true father being Roland. Zuko's true father is Iroh, who was there for him for the entirety of the show's 3 seasons. I'm not on the verge of crying reading this answer. What?
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
And I think Shortstop basically summed up his arc there in a way that just made you remember experiencing it the first time. I mean, look, I was skeptical about this Avatar show, as anyone would be when someone sits you down in front of this child cartoon looking thing.
Yeah.
It's remarkable storytelling. And I agree that Zuko's arc in the story is one of the best things it does. And I mean, talking about a redemption arc that doesn't end in death, I think that the smartest thing this show does is exactly what Shortstop mentioned here, is that the first part of the second half of the season is Zuko like attempting to earn the trust of this team, and they spread it out. Like it doesn't just happen, right? It's not just like, and then he decided to be good and everyone's like, yay. No, he's got to earn it. And it's so well done. It's like, talk about earned. It's so well done.
Yeah. There's no one moment where Zuko is redeemed. It's hard work, and there's like backsliding, there's awkward, there's failure before he actually achieves it, and then by the end when he faces Azula, it's not like, oh, that's his redemption. It's like, no, by that point that's just the thing that Zuko would do, because he's
totally.
because
he's fucking awesome.
He is.
Yeah. All right, so where was I was doing? Okay. Next, we have Philgard 007, who says redemption has 2 related definitions, and both characters exhibit those definitions. Sorry, I cut out the part where he said which characters. He's talking about Red and Andy Dufresne from The Shawshank Redemption. Red is the only guilty man in Shawshank. He's a murderer who has done his time and tries to display the proper decorum in front of the parole board each decade to get out. But after his time with Andy and the events of the story, he shows a true remorse and understanding, and he tells the parole board that he wishes he could go back and talk to the kid that he was and set him straight. He compensates for the fault in his past by showing a desire to change what he's done, thus redeeming himself. Then, Andy. Redemption is, at its true essence, regaining possession of something by making payment. Andy has lost himself. His marriage is flawed and terrible, which leads to an affair that ends in the death of his wife and her lover. We never fully get a sense of whether Andy is guilty or innocent, which I love because he has lost himself and must redeem/buy back his life of their murder. But in prison, he becomes a criminal and pet for the warden. And even through his descent, the path for redemption, i.e. a tunnel in the wall of his cell, is forming. Through his early time in prison where he pays the price to the sisters and is brutally raped, then through his time as a warden's pet, and then through his time helping other inmates better themselves through the library, and finally climbing through a river of shit, Andy has paid the price to redeem himself and gain back his life.
That's interesting because I've only ever seen the movie, and I noticed a couple of differences. Is it true in the book it's not clear whether he was the murderer or not? I
can't remember. Okay. I think I always thought he was innocent. Like I always assumed he was innocent, but I don't know.
I can see it being a Stephen King thing to not really make it clear though. So,
sure.
Yeah, that's cool. I like this. Yeah, this is a good answer of it's literally called the Shawshank.
Yeah, Redemption. The Shawshank Redemption. Yeah. We'll have to do other levels of the tower on Shawshank one day.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Next one, Al84001 says, hands down, got to be Phil in Groundhog Day. Although the charm of Bill Murray keeps you from ever hating the guy outright, his character does go from complete unmitigated asshole to someone you want to cheer for in the end. It also features his pretty apropos to the Dark Tower line of dialogue from Phil, waxing poetic on the nature of divinity. I'm a god. I'm not the god, I don't think. Reminiscent of King's confession under hypnosis in Song of Susanna.
Love it, love it, love it.
Yeah.
Next up, we have the amazing Duck42 who says, for the discussion, my favorite redemption arcs come from everyone's favorite vampire saga. Buffy the Vampire Slayer and In Angel, the spinoff. Tons of characters have great growth in those shows. Buffy, Willow, Angel, Spike, Anya, etc., 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 etc. But my favorite is Cordelia's arc, which has her going from a self-absorbed narcissist to an invaluable heart of the team. I couldn't stand her when I started watching. She was everything that teenager me couldn't stand about the popular kids in high school. But as the show progressed, she became amazing, brave, a true heroine in her own right. Oh, do I agree? And one day, Matt will too.
One day. Pear Jane says, this one's for Matt. Aw, I'm picking King Theoden. He has such a wonderful arc, and he is one of the only main characters in Lord of the Rings who can be downright unlikable. When we meet him, he has lost control of his kingdom, he lost his son, and he makes a series of bad choices to hide from the world that further endanger his people. He threatens to abandon Gondor because he believes Gondor abandoned him. But when Gondor calls for aid, Rohan answers. Theoden chooses not to hide behind an illusion of safety and leads the greatest cavalry charge in cinematic history. Yes, even better than Light on the Third Day, Gandalf. It's true. I think Theoden's speech is one of the better moments of the entire thing.
So good.
While he does die, his redemption comes much earlier. Muster the Rohirrim when he decides to go to battle for all the people of Middle-earth. He finally understands that humanity is not transactional and we are all worth saving. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think in both the book and the movie, Theoden is one of the characters where you're like, is this a guy who I'm gonna like? Is he a good guy even?
Yeah. Yeah. You're definitely not sure what to make of him. The first time I read the books, I was definitely like, it's kind of amazing seeing the turn he goes through, where by his death you are really devastated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think, just that whole part of that movie is one of my favorite kind of sequences of the whole Lord of the Rings film saga.
That actor just does a great job giving those inspirational speeches.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
it's so good. Sturgeon11 selects a character from The Stand, and I just want to say, Sturgeon, that I agree with you 1,000% here, but I don't want to say anything else because I want Matt to experience this character and their arc himself one day. So that's all we're going to say on that one. But I'm with you. I'm with you.
All right. Awesome. Can't wait. Man of Zimmer says, I'm not taking the creepy baby bait. So one of my favorite.
What does that mean?
Not going to take that bait. So one of my favorite moments of earned redemption comes from the TV show Fringe, which was awesome. They say it was like Dark Tower meets X-Files. Without massive dynamic spoilers, wink, wink. This is, I don't know what that means. This is fundamentally a story about fathers and their children and the lengths they will go to, and the links that they will go to for them. Self be damned, worlds be damned. At the end of the series, Walter Bishop, played absolutely brilliantly by John Noble, who should have won at least one freaking award, do not get me started, is forced to make a decision of self-sacrifice and of redemption. After all the massively shitty and selfish things that he does in the name of love, his last act is so touching. I love this show. Please tell me you did a podcast on it already, because I'm going to need something when we are done with this. It's only 100 episodes.
No, we have not done a podcast on Fringe. And I've not finished Fringe. I watched part of it, and I enjoyed the parts I saw. I just never, took the time to get through it all.
I've not seen any Fringe. Sorry.
It's a good show. I think you'd like it. Next up, we have Lynette B, who says one of the best redemption arcs has to be Hercules, aka Heracles. People either know him as a strong man or the Disney character, but his story hits deeper. At the mercy of the gods, Ka, he falls insane and kills his own wife and children. While many might have blamed their actions on insanity or the intervention of gods over which they have no power, when he recovers his mind, Hercules feels incredibly guilty. He devotes himself to the 12 labors as a way to redeem the wrongs he has done. He doesn't shrug it off, but rather uses his gifts, the very things that made his crimes possible, to work through the trauma of those crimes. I think it works very nicely that his labors are physical challenges. Hercules shows balance in that he committed atrocities with his body, then uses that same body to assist others, atoning for his crimes.
Huh. I see how they stole some ideas from Kratos's narrative arc. In
Matt, I have something to tell you. That did not come first.
Huh. Oh, it's all the same body of literature, though.
You play one God of War game, and suddenly you're a genius of Greek literature.
Yeah, I pieced it mostly together from video games, so. I Can't Drive 69 once again gives us the correct answer and says Jesse from Breaking Bad.
Spoilers for Breaking Bad, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
Granted, he was never the main villain of the show. He mostly just got caught up in an increasingly horrible situation, but he still had his share of serious misdeeds that he needed to make up for. His character was put through absolute hell to the point where we felt he had long since redeemed himself and also shown he had true heart. About midway through the run of the show, we have no choice but to start to feel for him. And by the last season, our hearts are breaking every time he is forced to walk through yet another circle of hell. By the end of the show, he is objectively and undoubtedly a criminal of the highest order. He's been involved in multiple murders, including one where he pulled the trigger himself, produced and sold huge amounts of an illegal and dangerous drug, and broken countless other laws in the process. But, in the eyes of the viewer, he has shown true remorse and has tried extremely hard to put things right. But he's always punished for his attempts. When he's finally allowed to escape his tormentors, we are cheering for him. We feel that his escape was well-deserved, and we know that he is a changed man who will not return to a life of crime. And because I have never seen El Camino, I assume that continues to be true.
El Camino isn't bad.
I want to watch it. It's one of those things where I'm like, I'm just saving it.
Sure.
I'm just saving it.
Yeah, very, very well said. I really need to rewatch me some Breaking Bad. Maybe I've already decided that I'm doing that.
Yes.
I've already watched like half of the pilot and took like 5 pages of notes on it. Just so you know.
Well, I want to hear you talk about Breaking Bad.
Okay.
So
next we have Crossland S, who mentions a character from the Red Rising series, which is a series I've never read, so not going to have much commentary on this answer. But they say that they're covering the series on their own podcast, and they recommend it to everyone and anyone and everyone. So spoilers if you're interested. So spoilers for Red Rising, folks. Cassius Al Bologna has one of the best redemption arcs across not one, but 2 different parts of this double trilogy. How many characters actually get 2 chances to recover their position? Yeah, not many.
Yeah,
not many. Not in literature, at least.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm curious what shape that takes.
Yeah.
All right, now we're moving on to the second question. What's your favorite creepy baby?
Creepy baby question.
Tasha Bex says, for creepy baby, I second the post above. Mention the head-turning nightmare on the ceiling that is the train-spotting hallucination baby.
Oh my God.
Christ, that thing freaked me out and made me recategorize that movie into horror. Also, honorable mention to the creepy CGI attempted at the highly developed baby child in Twilight. babies shouldn't look like that.
Agree. I forgot about the train spotting hallucination.
I haven't seen that.
You haven't seen that feels like a Matt movie.
Yeah,
I'm really surprised that you haven't.
You've
seen
told me that before.
I
need to put that on an actual list. If only I had an actual list.
If only there was just a way to open a document right now and write the name of a movie.
That's
down.
what I'm doing. But the thing is, I'm just going to save it on my desktop and the title's going to be like movie, and then nothing's going to happen. Look, I'm doing it right now. I wrote train spotting, save as, file name, movie.txt, closing file. There, now we're done. All right, moving on.
Why don't you name it in big caps, movies I really need to watch, and maybe that will work better for you.
I'll do that later.
Fuck. Next up, we have Arroyo, who says, not sure my answer exactly fits the bill, but whenever someone says creepy baby, I always immediately jump to Babyface from Toy Story, which incidentally also has a spider body. I wonder if Stephen King was channeling him when he came up with Mordred. I think that fits the bill perfectly. That's definitely a creepy baby. He ends up being a nice creepy baby, but
it is so creepy because it doesn't talk. It's like the first toy you meet that doesn't talk.
Yeah.
It's so creepy. God, it's so scary. Yeah. Okay. Brett7921 says, creepy baby. I would have to say baby Oscar from Ghostbusters 2. The high forehead and odd walk on the ledge was enough to creep me out. And the fact that I was 10 when that movie came out didn't help. But it did give me nightmares, and I still remember them vividly for some reason.
Yep. Oscar was a little creepy. He's a little creepazoid.
Yeah, he's a little uncanny. You're right.
Especially when the painting dudes, when Vigo's face like went into him very briefly, that was mega creepy.
Not sure if my kids have seen Ghostbusters 2 yet. I need to rectify that.
It's not, I mean, I love it, but I'm biased. I don't think it's actually that good. It just kind of does the same thing over again, which when you're a child is like awesome. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I like Ghostbusters 1. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Jeremy K says, I'm going to answer the creepy baby discussion question with The Binding of Isaac, the video game. It starts off with a simple prologue of a mother hearing the voice of God who ultimately says she must kill her son, Isaac. Isaac runs into the basement only to find out it is now infested with all kinds of monsters and demons. If you look at the cover art, Isaac is barely out of the toddler stage, although it's never directly stated. Through 25 different and expanded endings of the game, we gather through symbolism how Isaac must literally kill himself, but the part of himself that he hates and in some endings his actual self. The game is apparently about mental health and acceptance. While some can say that all the devil rooms, horsemen of the apocalypse, and Satan boss battles are literally happening, the game tends to theorize that Isaac's perception of himself is the actual villain, so I think he qualifies. All in all, creepy baby.
Wow, this was a surprisingly deep answer to the what's your favorite creepy baby question.
Yeah.
I want to play that game too. I'm out here. I'm going to open it in a notepad file. Games.txt, Binding of Isaac. All right, let's move on. Okay. My favorite creepy baby is the one from David Lynch's Eraserhead. Nothing is more unsettling than the sounds that thing makes. It may not have spider legs, but it is still very hard to look at. Man, I have a hard time even looking at like a still picture of that thing. And that's just like it's obviously just a, the plaster, thing, but God, it's so creepy. It's so successfully. Yeah, I'm just thinking about it.
Next up, we have Young Fella 19 who says the green baby from the manga series JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 6 Stone Ocean. I think they included a picture of it in their tweet, and it looks like a green creepy thing. So
cool.
Totally.
Great. Chantel D says the zombie baby from Dawn of the Dead remake, or Gage from Pet Sematary. Gage legit made me afraid of small blonde toddlers in the dark.
Gee, Matt, I wonder what that means. I guess you'll have to read Pet Sematary.
See, I was just thinking about all the times that I've seen small blonde toddlers in the dark in my house. Or like,
were they your children?
Yes.
Okay.
But I've definitely had the thing where like I hear small footsteps and then I like look at my doorway in the dead of night and I see a small shape standing there and not saying anything, and then you're like, hey sweetie, and then they pause for just a little bit too long before they say, oh hey daddy, I need some water, and you're like, oh Jesus Christ.
Hey Matt, maybe you shouldn't read Pet Sematary. That sounds terrifying. Holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's your kid, but but it's good. It's worth it.
It's so creepy. I can't wait. All right, that is all of our answers. Thank you, everyone who submitted questions or answers to one of those two questions. That was a lot of fun. I really do appreciate that. And I think, hopefully, people are going to have a good time with this next question, Matt. I think this is a little more work intensive, this next question, maybe, but I think it's going to be fun. So what we want you to do for next week's discussion question is select one of your favorite literary characters, and then I want you to describe what their mind trap projection would look like. So take one of your characters, drop him in that hallway with Jake. What does he see when he's looking down that hallway, or she? What do they see when they're looking down that hallway? I think that'll be fun.
That does sound really fun. I'm really looking forward to these answers.
My original version of the question is, what would you see? But then I thought maybe that's a little too personal.
Yeah.
People getting into their biggest fears
right.
and displaying them all over the internet might be a little too personal. So yeah, let's take your favorite character. And I say literary character, it can be a TV show or a movie character too. I don't care.
Yeah.
There's no rules here.
Yeah. Everything is literature.
Yes. All right. Well, that is it for us here this week on Kingslingers. Next week, we are covering the first 4 chapters of part 2 of this novel titled Blue Heaven. So here we go. We're entering part 2, and we're going to be in part 2 for the rest of the year. So we'll be in part 2 for the next 4 episodes. But here we're covering the first 4 chapters of that part. So read those and then come see us next week.
Yeah. Remember, you can reach out to us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com. or on Twitter at kingslingerspod. And the subreddit, reddit.com/r/doofmedia is a fun place to hang out and a good place to answer those discussion questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And apparently Spotify is like doing their top podcasts thing where they tell you what the podcast you listened to the most was. So there's people on Reddit sharing those right now, and it's just delightful. Thank you, everyone. It's so fun to see. So,
yeah, appreciate that. Thank you.
It's been a wild year for us, so thank you for doing that. So if you want to go share your Spotify top podcasts on our subreddit, head on over to r/doofmedia and chat with some people.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we strongly recommend you do so you'll never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
Yeah. And if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, then please consider donating to our Patreon account at patreon.com/doofmedia. Just today, we kind of shuffled around some of the reward tiers. Mm-hmm. Not a lot, but if you haven't looked in a while, you might consider going to look. It's actually a lot simpler now.
Yeah, we made it so much simpler to read. Yeah.
A lot less words to decide, what rewards are associated with what tier. And so,
yeah, what kind of idiot wrote all those words?
It made sense at the time. But this week, though, special thanks to new folks joining us on the Patreon: New Bedoofs, Dyrenair, Talia D, Nash, and Phoenix E. Yep. Welcome. I think I recognize some of these names. So it's great to have you, and I will see you around the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, if you cannot afford to donate to us right now, that is absolutely okay. There are crazy times happening, and it's the holiday season. So there's lots of expenses going on. So we totally understand. But you can help us out by sharing this podcast. Make it your Christmas gift or just holiday gift, whatever. Gift the knowledge of this podcast to all your constant reader friends.
That's right.
Or you can just help us out by leaving us a rating and review. This week's Spotlight review comes from The Tower Junkie, who gives us 5 stars and says, "Thought I'd hate it. Fell in love instead. I really didn't think I'd like this podcast. I've read the Dark Tower series about half a dozen times, and the premise of the show just doesn't make sense to me. What's the point of having a podcast host who hasn't already read the series? Surely the real fun of a Dark Tower podcast is in all of the connections you can make across the series and with the other King books, right? But you can't do that if you're running a no spoilers podcast. So what even is the point?" I'm glad that Tower Junkie gave us 5 stars here, because the first half of this... I'm more than happy to report that I was unequivocally wrong. Okay, good. Over the past few months, this has become one of my absolute favorite podcasts. It's easy to praise the analytical depth that Scott and Matt provide, but what I really didn't expect was the sheer joy of reliving the series for the first time through Matt, the host who hasn't read the series before. The moment this podcast turned from good to great for me was the first episode on The Drawing of the Three, where the story takes a crazy pivot from a traditional gritty Western to Roland portaling into Eddie's world to help him smuggle drugs on an airplane. Having read the series so many times, I had honestly stopped appreciating what an absurd and entertaining twist this is. I already know it's coming after all, but listening to Matt's reaction and his obvious enjoyment brought me straight back to my first reading of the series. As I continue to listen week by week, I keep thinking about all the different twists and turns that I can't wait for the show to get to. This is an incredible podcast, and I can't recommend it enough, whether this is your first journey to the tower or your 100th. Well, that turned wonderful. So thank you so much.
What a roller coaster. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do think, Matt and I tried a lot of different kind of show types before we kind of settled on this, an experienced person leading a new person through. And I think it is the best of both worlds, where you get to describe stuff from an analytical perspective, but you also get to allow people to relive that experience, because that is something that you can't really get many other places. Like even if your friend's reading the series for the first time, even if I just gave these books to Matt and he was reading them for the first time, I wouldn't get this near in depth of a conversation with you, Matt, about every little twist and turn of the books, unless I forced you to sit in front of a microphone. So I do think the thing that we've created here, and the reason I think we're going to keep doing it this way, is because it just allows people to experience that thing that you can't get anywhere else. And I think there is absolutely value in that. So I'm glad that the Tower Junkie agrees with us, because I think it's great. And it's so fun for me reliving this book through you as well.
Yeah. And, and we of course all appreciate the tremendous psychological strain that it places you under to have to continually keep straight what information is spoilers and what is not. But it is
getting both harder and easier as we approach the end. Easier because there's just less stuff to accidentally say, but harder because I'm seeing the ground, like the things that he's laying down to get to those moments.
Oh yes, I get
and it's just very difficult to I want to point at them, but not with my finger, with I don't know, I want to just nudge, just a nudge.
Sure. I mean, but I totally get it, because we did the same thing with the Worm podcast, but I was in your chair and you were in mine, and as we were building toward the climax of that story, it's a kind of delightful tension that it's what you always I like what you just said. It's what you always wish that you were getting when you give your favorite books to your friend, and your friend's going to go off and read them, and you're like, oh, but I want you to tell me about your experience. I want to share that with you, because that's it's great that you're going to read it and maybe we can talk about it later, but that's not really the same thing as really reliving it with that person.
Yep.
That's what we're trying to provide.
Yeah, and hopefully everyone agrees with the Tower Junkie, because that's what we're trying to do. And so it's great. It's great to see that feedback. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tower Junkie, for that wonderfully worded and incredibly kind review. We really do appreciate that. And every one of you out there listening, whether you've left us a review or not, we appreciate all of you. We just passed Thanksgiving, and we're so thankful for each and every one of you. It's been a crazy year, but getting to do this has been a continuing delight for me. So
yeah, thank you.
All right, folks, we will see you right back here next week as we move on to part 2 of this book. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.